Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a social activist, abolitionist, and leading figure of the early women's rights movement. As a young woman, her exposure to abolition movements in New York inspired her to join in on the cause. As she sought education, Stanton was dismayed that the young men graduating with her were academically inferior to her abilities, yet they went on to Union College. This prompted her to really think about women's equality. For example, she wrote, "I obstinately refused to obey one with whom I supposed I was entering into an equal relation, on regards with her wedding." This shows that she knows that marriage is supposed to be equal, but society continued to oppress women. Before moving to Seneca Falls, Stanton befriended Lucretia Mott, who was also a feminist and abolitionist like her. The two women planned the first women's convention, the Seneca Falls Convention, on July 19th and 20th of 1848. In this convention, she and other women wrote an important document named the Declaration of Sentiments, which was largely based on the framework of the Declaration of Independence. As a feminist, her concerns went beyond just voting rights for women. She was also an advocate in women's custody, divorce, property, employment, and income rights. Overall, Elizabeth Cady Stanton is significant because of her role of being a leading figure of the early women's rights movement with Lucretia Mott.
Lucretia Mott was born to Quaker parents and followed the faith, becoming a Quaker minister. She went with the more progressive wing of her faith, becoming known as a religious reformer. Her interest in women's rights began when she discovered that male teachers were paid 3 times as much as female ones. Lucretia advocated equal social and legal rights for women. In 1848, Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton organized a women's rights convention at Seneca Falls, New York. When the women's rights movement split into 2 factions over priorities of women's suffrage and black male suffrage, she tried to bring the two together. She helped write the Declaration of Sentiments, which included saying that all men and women were created equal. Lucretia's Quaker background also influenced her anti-slavery stance. She was an abolitionist and advocated not buying the products of slave labor. After the Civil War, she continued to advocate the rights of African Americans. In 1850, she published the influential Discourse on Woman, a big step in her life as an abolitionist, religious reformer, and social rights activist.
The Seneca Falls Convention was organized by Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton in 1848. It was the United States' first women's rights convention and held almost 200 women in attendance for the first day. The first day was exclusively for women, but the rest of the days were open to the public, men and women. During this convention, Stanton read her Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances, which demanded equality for women's social status as well as legal rights equal to that of the men. The Declaration of Sentiments then detailed the injustices inflicted upon the women in the United States and was a call to women to organize and petition for their rights. For proclaiming a woman's right to vote, the Seneca Falls Convention was subjected to public ridicule, and some of the backers of women's rights withdrew their support. However, this resolution marked the beginning of the women's suffrage movement in America. The Seneca Falls Convention was followed 2 weeks later by an even larger meeting in Rochester, New York. Thereafter, nation women's rights conventions were held annually, providing an important focus for the growing women's suffrage movement. After years of struggle, the 9th Amendment was adopted in 1920, 72 years later after this very first convention. So 72 years later, American women finally were constitutionally protected in their right to vote.